Hey everyone, I'm Airwingmarine. Welcome back to the channel and my next Escape from Tarkov video. Today we're going to dive into the Tarkov economy, talk about items you should be keeping, items you shouldn't be keeping, and then some tips and tricks along the way. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into it. All right, real quick. This loot guide is a way for me to help out players get through their looting a little bit more efficiently. These are rules that I follow and it seems to work out pretty well for me, but they're by no means like the 10 commandments or things you have to do. It's just trying to give advice, give you a line essentially to draw to where you know what's good and what's not. And that rule, that line I draw is 12.5k rubles. Now you can pick whatever you want for yourself. You can be 10k, you could be 15k. Shoot, you could be 20k if you're running somewhere that has loot that's always above 20k. But the whole point of the line is so you can make decisions quicker. There are over 22,000 items in this game. And because of that, it's impossible to know what each of them's worth. But it is easy to kind of put a yes-no tag to them and then kind of pay attention to ones that kind of dance back and forth between that line. I threw in chapters this time. Sorry, I tend to forget these. Berate me in the comments if I forget them, and I'll go back and put them in the future. But it should help you guys be able to hop to the specific spots that you're interested to, especially for people that are returning and watch these, basically every week when I make them. I'm also trying to dial these in so they're a little less filled with jibber jabber and get you the guys info you want. So make sure you let me know in the comments what you like. Do you like me going over a bunch of items quickly? Do you want me to do deep dives into specific items and talk about why they're worth more than something else? So just let me know in the comments what you guys like to see and we'll start steering the content that way. So we'll start off here with items for relatively new players or guys, people that don't play the game a ton, don't have a ton of hours. So there's some items that you should always pick up no matter what. Hands down, these things are always worth picking up. And basically anything that starts with military, so like military circuit board, military gyro, military cable, there's a handful of them. But if it says military, it's worth keeping, including the key. There's a military checkpoint key. It's definitely worth keeping. Keep those things. Keep anything that says military in them. You've got your super obvious ones like LEDX and ophthalmoscopes, but just keep in mind that you need specifically these found in raid for a task. So if you find them, they are super valuable, especially found in raid. CPUs, worth a shit ton right now. Not necessarily worth throwing in your gamma unless you're crafting graphics cards, but out of raid, they are worth anywhere from 70,000 to 120,000, depending on the time of the week and the day. Soap, something you should always be keeping. And I say that because when you're low level, there are a bunch of really good crafts for soap that help you out, help you make a little bit money. So that's where that kind of comes from. I'm not trying to say soap is in the same category as a LEDX necessarily in value, but when you're looking for stuff to always keep, soap tends to be there. Not necessarily because it's worth selling, but because you get good crafts out of it and can make a lot of money with the crafts. Moving on, screws, nuts, bolts, nails. These are you always want to keep those. Circuit boards, Nixer lenses, cyclones, and pressure gauges. You'll see these a lot in caches. These things are worth quite a bit. And then gunpowders. All the gunpowders now are worth keeping. Blue fluctuates. We'll look at it here. You're at 28, 30,000. Sometimes you see it down in the 24,000. Doesn't matter. Always keep the gunpowders. It's just easy to remember. You don't have to sweat it. You see a gunpowder, grab it. The filter shouldn't be here. Let's hide that. That's not where I want. Tetrises. Now, I say Tetrises because there's a huge uproar as of right now with the barter they did for Tetrises. There's a barter and it is actively being changed as we speak. They are tweaking this every day. They're changing limits. They're doing all sorts of stuff. But as of the time of this video, it's 2 Tetrises and 2 green batteries to get 1 Bitcoin. Now, that has made green batteries worth a small fortune as well. As you can see, 200 to 250K, sometimes 300K, and that will get you a Bitcoin. So green batteries and Tetrises are definitely worth keeping and put it in your secure container because you don't need them found in raid for that barter. One other thing, super easy to remember, and I'm going to move these out of here because those don't belong. Let's put those over there. The filters, anything that's a filter, period, filter. Doesn't matter what kind of filter it is, it's worth keeping. You got your FP100 filters, your water filters, your military filters. Look, there's military again, like I said, and then your air filter for gas masks. These are all worth keeping. They're all worth a bunch of money. They're definitely worth their slots. So if you ever see filters, just keep them. Easy to remember. And that applies for the gas mask too, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And that pretty much rounds out the items for kind of newer players, people that are not super in depth into the game with looting. Next thing we're going to move on to is items that you may overlook, but should definitely keep. This group is here as I'm always trying to find 1 or 2 items that not everybody knows about so that I can add a little bit of value to your guys' day. So the first one I want to talk about is power banks. Now these things are kind of weird to see in raid. They look a little bit weird. They're bigger than you would think, but they are worth an absolute fortune. You use them to make defibs, and that's what drives the price on these, I believe. But this is a ton of money. And if you get one, I always secure container it because I can make defibs. Kind of depends on where you're at, whether it's worth secure containering or not. Propane. Now, these guys are a little finicky. And I was kind of hoping when I was shooting this that propanes would be on the low end, because you'll see them get down into below 40K. And then they swing back up to 70, even 80K, which right now you can see they're at 70K. So even if you get one of these out of raid and you're seeing there it's 40K, don't sweat it. List it for 50, 60, 70K. It will sell. And it's because people need to buy a ton of these for the Red Rebel. So you clear out a whole page of these things when somebody's trying to barter for the Red Rebel. So just keep that in mind. Don't freak out if you see propanes at 40K. They're almost always worth keeping. Paper. Now this one is going to be one that I think a lot of veterans might not realize, just because it's never been worth money for, how many wipes, but now it's used for the Intel Intel barter, the Intel craft in the Intel Center, the folder with intelligence, and also for the water filter craft. So this thing has a lot more demand, sent the price up. So when you see paper, definitely worth keeping, and definitely worth secure containering at times, depending on what kind of loot you get. Moving into some of these other items, tools. So, for example, wrenches, elites, flat screwdrivers, and regular screwdrivers. These are worth keeping. Wrenches can kind of get down below. You'll see them in the 10, but I always pick them up. I always sell them for 13K. I do pretty good. Same thing with elites. You'll see elites get low once in a while, but I tend to sell them for over 13K consistently. And then flat screwdrivers, which these are the 1-slots screwdrivers, they will sell for a small fortune. So I always pick them up as well, and that's because you use them for crafting these circuit boards. Now SNB, which is why I have these here, SNB is worth taking out a raid. It comes in stacks of 40. So when it's selling at 645 rubles, a stack of 40 is worth 25,000, depending on where you sell in here. So it's always worth taking SNB out. I grab it, I pick it up, along with PBM, which I don't have in here, but those are the two boxed ammos I pick up all the time. Tapes. Now these things have been kind of finicky, but you have been able to make money with them. So I haven't been picking them up for about a month now, maybe a little bit longer, but they're worth picking up again. And it's just because of barters and things like that are driving it, and some crafts, but it's easy to remember. Tape, pick it up, because the Keck tape too, but the Keck tape, something you always pick up. I probably should have put it up in here. It's definitely a thing worth picking up. IFAKs and hemostats. Now, even IFAKs like this 273, now I can't list this one because it's not found in raid, but you're seeing somebody here selling these 279, 250 for above that 12.5K rule I have. And you can do that all the time. I've sold them as high as 16,000. It just depends on when the reset for therapist is. And hemostats are another one. When they start to run out, or the timer gets low, which I don't think she's going to run out, but people use up their 5 and they have to buy more, you'll see these things push 17, 18,000. So if you find hemostats in raid, they're great. You have to kind of watch because they kind of look like bandages just because of the packaging, especially if the shadings and you're in a building that's dark, but they're a great little thing, 1 slot to pick up. Toothpaste, Poxaram syringes, all 3 of these, great little items. Now, Poxaram, to be honest, I should probably put Poxaram down here in this group, but we'll leave it here for now. Well, I sell them for over 12.5 regularly. I think they're worth like 11,000 to therapists by themselves, so they're actually a pretty good item, even if you get them out of raid. So 12,000 too, they almost make that number without even having to get them out of raid. You can, or even sell them on the flea market. You can sell them right to therapist and make the money. Food. Now, these can shift around. Things like tarcola, squash, herring. I don't have herring in here. I don't know why. I apologize for that. I should have a herring there. The Tarcola, squash, and herring are used for the holodink barter, so they're always maintaining their value. Squashes can be down in 12.5, but sometimes, see, now they're up in 25.30 again. They kind of go all over the place, but they're usually worth keeping. Tushankas are used with crafts. I always sell these for about 15K. Humpbacks, I always get the 12.5 out. I bring them out because I like them for a food source, just because they have a low hit to hydration and a good energy, but you can usually sell them. And then condensed milks. These are, you'll see streamers pick these up constantly. And the reason is here because they sell for 15,000 by themselves. So these will go in secure containers pretty quick. You should always pick these up. And I don't sell them on the flea market. I just sell them to therapists or Jaeger. It's a great way to level up Jaeger's money if you want to, buy a bunch of these on the flea market and sell them to him or craft them or whatever. Zibbos, you find these in jackets and filing cabinets, worth picking up. They are a great little 1 slot, and as you can see, sometimes they even push 18,000. Magnets. These things can be cheap, but usually you can get them into the 14, 15K range. You can craft them as well, but I see them, I get happy to pick them up. I usually don't sell them because I use them to craft defibs constantly. Matches. Now these are the classic matches, not the hunter matches. These things are a bunch of different places they spawn, primarily, filing cabinets, jackets, things like that. But you'll see them in caches. They're worth a bunch of money, and it's one of those things that I think a lot of people run over, which is why they're worth so much. But I've had raids where I've gotten 5 or 6 sets of matches out and 120K. I mean, that's a gold mine. Sodiums may be past your paying attention point, but 2 things that are great about sodiums, why I put them in my secure container. Even if I have something that's worth like 20,000, I'll put the sodium in most of the time, because if I get out of raid, if I die and don't get it out of raid with a found in raid status, I can make bleach with it, and bleach can be used to make a bunch of money. So that's where sodium falls in. 2 little items here that I want to point out are these 50 cal BMGs, shotgun shells with 12x70s. These things are worth a bunch of money. I still don't know why. To me, it doesn't make any sense. Somebody's got something figured out. I don't, though. But nonetheless, you find these in little ammo boxes, little ammo wooden crates, caches. I don't know that I've ever found them on a scav. I think you can find them in some other weapon boxes. Nonetheless, when you find these things, keep them, because they are worth a bunch of money. And then the Lay's TAC-2s. These things are overlooked by a bunch of people, I think. You find them very frequently on scavs with shotguns, and sometimes even AKs and stuff that have lasers or lights on them. These things are worth a bunch. 1, because they're used in a task, and 2, because the trader price is so high. So you can regular sell these for over 35K. I've sold them at 40, 45, just kind of depends on the time of day, but they're always worth keeping. So keep an eye out for them, simply because they are worth a bunch, and they can look like the X400s. So I run a bunch of where's one right here. So I prefer the X400, but just because it's cheaper. They kind of look the same when you're looking at like the little weapon thing here and you're trying to pick them out. I just pick them up, doesn't matter, worth a bunch of money. Make sure that you sell them on the flea market, not vendor them though. Along with that are the 34 millimeter scope rings. Now, one thing you have to always remember, it doesn't matter. This is another really good rule of thumb. If it says 34 millimeter, you keep it. And so that you see there's none listed here, and there's some listed there for the 90,000 range, 100,000 range, and these are in the 50. You can list this regularly for 100, 150, sometimes even 200,000 rubles, and it'll sell just like that. So keep that in mind, that these 34 millimeters, it doesn't matter what they are worth a bunch of money, just because they use them for tasks. And people aren't aware of like some of the, like there's barters for these things, several barters for all of them, which makes me sad that people don't do that. But I guess it's kind of because it's locked behind Jaeger. Either way, 34 millimeter, great. Also, 4.1 inch M-locks have seemed to be worth a ton right now. And on top of that, some of the others, like the 2-inch ones and stuff, can be worth good money as well. Right now, you can see there's unlisted, but if we go look at the chart, you'll see that these things can sell for 50, 60, 80, 150,000. I don't know who's spending 150,000 on one of these things, but they are, and that's crazy. But just keep that in mind when you see these. They're usually real little. They'll spawn on top of crates. They'll be inside of boxes. I almost always pick them up because there's more of these quick attach rails that go on either the M-lock systems or some of the other rails. They're almost always worth money. There's very few of them that aren't worth their slot price. So I just pick them up in general. A couple of new additions here are the serve kits and CMSs. These things have come back into where they're worth money. As you can see here, a 3-slot selling for 46,000. That's cash money. That's 15K all day long, 15K a slot all day long. And even the CMSs, which haven't been worth picking up for a while, they're 15K a slot, 16K a slot, 17K a slot. So if you're finding these are definitely worth keeping. They haven't been on a keep list for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 8 weeks, maybe 9 weeks. These things haven't been on a keep list, but they're back. And I wanted to let everybody know that they are worth that. They're worth keeping, and you can actually make decent money, especially if you're running labs or shoreline or any of those other maps that have a bunch of these on them. Scav vests. Kind of a weird one. A lot of people don't think about it. But one thing you have to remember is they have 6 slots. They take up 6 spaces. So what I'll do is I'll put them in my bag. I'll fill those up, and you're even. It can get kind of hairy if you're picking up rigs because of PvP and stuff like that. But the scav vests are worth a bunch of money, and it's free slots. You're talking about something that gives you 30, sometimes even 40K, and it doesn't take up any extra space in your backpack. So I try to pick them up when I see them. It's kind of hard to remember at times, but they are worth, especially when you can sell them in stacks of 4 or 5. It's just a bunch of money. Lastly, in the things you might be passing up is the gas masks. Now, For a while, these weren't worth their slot prices, if you could put them on because you were scav. But as you can see here, they are definitely worth taking out a raid now, just because people are using them to grind their hideouts, I believe. That's what I did. This is to help power level your hideout. So that pushes the price up. And here you go, 60, 70K for a gas mask. All right, the last kind of items here that I want to talk about are items that are worth keeping, but you need to be patient when selling. So things like PSUs, right? And it seems silly right now because I'm talking about them when they're 80K, and they're 20K a slot, but you'll see them dip down into the 40K range quite a bit, and even less sometimes. So it's kind of like the propane tanks. I pick up PSUs now, and sometimes I have to wait till I have 3 or 4 of them before I sell them. But I do. I'll wait, and then I sell them for, over 50, 60K. And right now you're going to sell them for 80K, so it seems silly that I'm talking about it. But you can see on the chart that it's not always that way. BT ammo. Now, with a 60 stack, in order for a 60 stack to be worth 12.5, the cutoff is basically 210 rubles per round. So as long as BT is over 210 rubles a round, and you've got a 60 stack of it, there is your 12.5K rule. But the best part is very frequently you could sell these things for over 300, 350. So maps like Reserve and even sometimes Customs and some of the other maps where you find bullets, I pick up the BT, especially the 120 round boxes, because it's actually pretty good loot. You can take them out. You've got little 1 slots you can put all over the place and move around and fill up, do the whole Tarkov Tetris, and they're actually worth decent money. And I think a lot of people might pass up on those or not pay attention to it. Salewas. I know most people pick up Salewas just because they're good to have and they're hard to get a hold of. But right now is perfect because they're empty. Therapist is towards the end of her cycle, and you can see these things push 29, 30,000. I sell them pretty frequently for 29, 30,000, and it works out pretty well. So Salewas found in raid ones are worth taking out a raid. Just make sure you're patient with them. You list them at a higher price, even if they're only selling for 25. List them at that 29, and they will sell. Slickers bars. Now these have come back into fashion, if you will, because of these scav vests. Because you can't buy a scav vest from Jaeger anymore. All you can do is barter for a Slickers bar. So 12.5 is usually pretty easy. A lot of times you can get over 13 for them. But again, they're one of those things that I hang on to till I have 5 or 6 of them, and then I sell them in big packages. Same thing applies to crackers and tubes. These two things can be hard to get over that 12.5 rule consistently, but as long as you hang on to them and you sell them in piles, you'll get there. Plex. Now Plex is another one. This thing is crazy because right now it's at 8,000. If I wasn't making the video, I'd be buying all these up because I use them for the face mask barters. But you regularly see these things push over 20,000, 25, sometimes even 30,000, especially if there's some kind of event going on where people are buying a bunch of Altons up. These will disappear quickly. So sit on your Plex, list it for high prices. You'll do pretty good. Hoses. Now, hoses and spark plugs are in here because I wanna bring these up specifically. I actually had somebody freak out on me because I didn't list hoses, or I said they weren't worth keeping. And he was actually right. He was rude, but he was right. So hoses right now worth 12, 14. These are not 12.5K slot, right? But if you hang on to them, they almost always push into this 27, 28,000. So I will pick up hoses usually. It is one of the first things I throw out. However, they can be worth that 12.5 pretty regularly. Now, spark plugs. I can't explain this. I have no idea what's going on with spark plugs. These things should be worth like 6,000, 7,000 rubles, but for whatever reason, they're 18K. And if the past history indicates, by me even talking about it right now, these are probably going to tank. So take advantage of it while you can, but don't come in here and get mad at me when these things go back down to 7,000. I wanted to bring them up because I was surprised. I don't know if it's because there's a bunch of new players or what's going on. I have no explanation for the spark plug being expensive, but it's a keeper now, which is surprising to me. Now, this next group of items is items that I will occasionally pick up. If I see them in raid or I'm towards the end of the raid or whatever, I'll pick them up. But I almost always end up throwing them out, with the exception of one of them in here. So cats, clocks, vases, these things rarely meet that 12.5 slot rule. In fact, clocks and cats never do, though they are worth decent money. So if you don't have anything else, they're okay. Vases can go anywhere from 40,000 to 50,000. So they're kind of in between here and here with items. I usually don't take them out of raid. I just don't risk it unless I'm close to empty or, I'm running squads and I know I'm not going to fill up on loot. Things like that, I'll take them out. Motors. I'll pick them up right away, but they usually get thrown out pretty quick. They push that 40,000 limit, but not very often, and they take up a ton of space. So they're just not something I like to run with. Blood sets. I'll pick them up and occasionally you'll see them push 12.5, but not very often anymore. So again, pick them up, but throw them out pretty quickly. Now, Amelia, I always keep these. I always keep these because I use them for the barter with Jaeger for sugar. That being said, they are not worth selling unless you have a level 3 intel center, because I'll show you right here. You can see what's going on with people selling these at 15, 16,000. Sure, hey, Airwing, these things are worth the 12.5 rule. They are not once you take into account, and I don't take flea market fee into account for many things, but stuff like this I do because it is so high. If you list this for 15,000, you got a 4,800 fee, which means you're 10,162. Not even close. So in order to get these to where you got to be able to sell them, it's like 22,000, I think, to where it actually pens out to that 6,000. See, even 22,000 doesn't cut it. And I have a level 3 intel and maxed hideout management, which means I've got a 45% reduction in my flea market fee. This flea market fee right here for somebody else is what? 16,000 probably at 22K. That's for somebody who doesn't have a level 3 intel, that's 16,000. So you're making 6,000 rubles. Unless you're using these for the barter, I wouldn't pick these up unless you have that level 3 intel and you can sell them for 23, 24,000. That's the only time they're really worth it. Now, all the way at the bottom, these are items that I just never pick up. If I see them, I just ignore them. I don't pick them up. And some of them may be confusing, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but these are the items that if I see them in a toolbox or I see them somewhere, a filing cabinet, wherever, or see them on a shelf, I just don't pick them up. You know, tool sets, horses, round pliers, nippers, pliers, long flat screwdrivers, chainlets, any cigarettes, orthodonto, the batteries, the AA and D batteries, croutons, 8 hard drives and DVDs, all of the fabric. The only fabric, and I probably forgot to talk about this, the only fabric worth keeping is ripstop. Other than ripstop, none of the fabrics are worth keeping. So those go down here. Light bulbs, relays, most armor, especially non-found in raid armors, are not worth taking out. There is a caveat to this, and we'll get to that, but for the most part, if you find armor in raid, like off of players, unless you're swapping your armor, insurance frauding and swapping your armor out, or, you know, something along those lines, armors are just not worth the slots they take up unless they're found in raid. And even then, it's not always worth it. Same thing for weapons. If you can put a weapon in a secondary slot, by all means do it. It's a free slot on your inventory. I'm not saying don't do that. But as far as putting them in your inventory, we'll just look at the SA-58. So it's worth 52,000 maybe. And it takes up 10 slots, takes up 12 slots. So, I mean, you're talking 4K a slot. Now, that's not worth it at all. One thing that is worth it, though, I got this off of a task. I got a mechanic task done that wasn't needed for Kappa. But taking that off and selling the gun and then selling the magazine. Look at that. That magazine's selling for 40,000. It's almost as much as the gun's going to sell for. So keep that in mind with a lot of firearms if you get them out of raid. Not AKs usually, but a lot of 7.62 guns, SMGs, the mags are worth taking out and selling. Now, when it comes to armor, there is one instance where it is absolutely worth it. And give me a sec here. I'm not trying to showboat for you guys. I'm going to show you two things here. That when you find rigs, it doesn't matter what kind of rig it is. If you're trying to add more space to your backpack, it's almost always worthwhile doing this. Because, for example, an AACPC takes up 12 slots, right? Well, when you look at it, it gives you 23. So that's giving you 11 free slots in your inventory, one of which is a big 4 slot that takes these are awesome. And the same thing with like MPVVs, and almost every rig out there, especially bigger ones, gives you more slots than they take up in a backpack. You know, it's like a negative space black hole or whatever that thing was in Harry Potter where, you know, you had a bag and it had a tent. Anyways, this is where armors are worthwhile, especially from players. If they got TV-110s, AACPCs, are really good. You know, you get into your Tactics and your M1 rigs, they're not quite so good because they take up 16 spaces versus the 12 spaces here, but it's just a little trick that you can do to maximize how much loot you get out of raid. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about here before I drag this out any farther is items that are easy to mix up and overlook. So you have a couple of specific ones here, and I'm going to make some room in my inventory here. Let's get some stuff so we have some room to talk about it. So some of the more common ones that can be easy to mix up, and let me move some stuff around here, are batteries, pliers, screwdrivers, and things like that. Toothpaste, Poxer rams. The Poxer rams not so much, but we'll show them anyways. So the batteries, these pliers, not so much that screwdriver, but these two screwdrivers here, and then your orthodonto toothpaste Poxerams. So these look similar. Poxerams are really, really little in the world. So they're not quite as easy to mix up, but they kind of look like a toothpaste tube. These two are easy. So you have to make sure you're picking up the right one. Orthodonto, not worth taking. Toothpaste, worth taking. Round pliers and Elites, same deal. They're red handled, they're pliers, they look similar. Just remember, pliers, Elites, worth it. Round pliers, not. Now, the long flat screwdrivers and flat screwdrivers, I still have to look at these closely when I see them in raids sometimes. Obviously, when you pick them up, it's obvious because this is 2 slot versus 1 slot, but the long flats are not worth taking. What are they worth? 8,000 maybe? Yeah, 8 to 9,000. And they're 2 slots versus the 30,000 plus of the flat screwdriver, which is a 1 slot. Pretty obvious, right? And batteries. In the daylight, they're super easy to see, but in the dark, it can be kind of confusing. So if I see the D batteries, not so much, but the AA batteries, if I'm seeing batteries and I'm looting quick, I'll almost always pick up the battery and then sort it out later, just in case it's a green battery and a AA battery you see sitting out there. That pretty much wraps it up. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope it helps you make a little bit more money in Tarkov, and we'll see you on the next one. Well, that wraps up the video. I appreciate you watching. Make sure you hit that like button because it helps out the channel a bunch, and subscribe for future content. We also have a Discord, links down in the description, that you can come join. We're filling up with a bunch of chill people who just love to play Tarkov. If you're looking to support the channel in other ways, we've launched a Patreon with some benefits like access to a Discord channel, constantly updated spreadsheet for my hideout calculations, and some other things if you want to go check it out over there. Lastly, thanks for your support on YouTube. It means the world to me, and I greatly appreciate every one of you. So with that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll see you in Tarkov.